It's my pleasure to introduce Egill Tómasson, who is has been awarded his, Egill is from Iceland, and he has been awarded his PhD from KTH Stockholm, so good representation of KTH today. His PhD was focused on generation adequacy, and he spent during his PhD a semester as a visiting researcher at the economics department under the renowned Professor Frank Pollack at Stanford University. And today Egill will talk to us about an incentive mechanism for generation capacity investment in a price-capped wholesale power market. Egill, the floor is yours. I think you are muted. We cannot.
Yes, do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you fine now.
And you see the screen as well.
And we see the screen as well.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Egill Tómasson, and I will be presenting the paper titled An Incentive Mechanism for Generation Capacity Investment in a Price Cap Wholesale Power Market. So if you start with the topic of the paper, as you might know, much has been written about the energy-only market, as well as its ability to achieve a socially optimal level of investment. And such an efficient market outcome should be achieved under ideal conditions, both in the short term as well as in the long term. But in the real world, there are several factors that prevent these results from being achieved. Those include price cap, risk aversion, as well as the exercise of market power by the incumbent firms. And even the European Commission acknowledges that there are shortcomings in the current market arrangements that reduce the attractiveness for new investment in the market. And this paper is a joint work with two professors from KTH, Mohammad, Reza, Hesamzadeh, and Lennart Söder, as well as Darryl, Biggar from the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. So in the paper, we analyze a multi-area electricity market in terms of the effects of administrative price caps on the level of investment. And we use a structured, a mixed complementarity problem, where we have several market players with opposing objectives, and we aim to find an equilibrium between those players. Then we propose a generation capacity incentive mechanism, which is then shown to induce the correct level of investment that maximizes social welfare in the market. And this is regardless of the level of the price cap. Finally, we propose an efficient decomposition approach to solve large-scale MCPs using the ADMM algorithm. And that proposed solution structure takes advantage of the multi-area nature of the market and enables simulation of large-scale multi-area electricity markets. So moving on to the market players, we can capture the behavior of the generation side of the market by the following optimization problem, where the generation maximizes its generation surplus and also takes into account the investment of the generation technology. And in order to fit this into the mixed complementarity structure, we find the optimality conditions for this specific optimization problem, and these are complementarity constraints seen by the perpendicular operator here. On the other hand, the demand side of the market maximizes its consumer surplus, shown by the green area here. And similarly, we can find the optimality conditions for this problem, which will be used to compose the mixed complementarity problem. This optimization problem captures the behavior of transmission, which buys electricity where this is cheaper and sells for a higher price in a different area, and therefore maximizes its profit. And we can find the KKT conditions of this problem as well. Finally, there's a market clearing constraint, which captures that there has to be energy balance in each of the areas, meaning that we have that the sum of the generation in an area needs to be equal to the demand as well as the outflow from that area. And then we have the dual variable of this constraint represents the market price in that specific area. So a benchmark solution approach is to take all of these optimality conditions for the generation, for the demand, as well as market clearing in each of the areas, line them up, as well as the optimality conditions for the transmission. And then we form a single MCP, which can then be solved by specialized solvers such as PATH, which are dedicated to solve such problems. And a solution that simultaneously satisfies all of the optimality conditions represents a long-term market equilibrium, and we see how the market settles and what the investment levels will be. So if we take a look at the effects of a price cap in the electricity market, on the left side, we can see market clearing without a price cap in the market. And then it's just a matter of the supply and demand intersecting at a point and setting the market price for a particular time period. On the right side, we see the effects of the price cap. So then the price is not allowed to reach the level required to clear the market efficiently. And then what in essence happens is that we move or shift a part of the surplus from the generation side to the demand side, which will then lead to improper investment incentives for the generation side of the market. So what we propose is to introduce an incentive mechanism which provides each generator with an uplift payment equal to this expression here, where we denote lambda prime as the resulting price from market clearing without the price cap in the market, which has to be estimated from the demand curve. Then essentially the generation faces a market price that properly reflects the demand side's value of electricity, and then the demand side is nevertheless protected against price spikes. And this then shifts the surplus back to the generators that had been shifted by the price cap to the demand side, and thereby sends the correct investment signal to the generation side of the market. The demand side finances this uplift payment scheme and then reaps the benefit of a higher consumer surplus than without the mechanism in place. So on to simulations. We simulate a 2-area illustrative example as well as larger systems with 3 areas, 6 areas, and 9 areas. And all of these systems are based on a stylized version of the Nordic power system, using actual data about consumption as well as the wind power availability in the Swedish and Norwegian power systems. We simulate 25 representative days with hourly resolution, and that's 600 hours in total. And in this table here, you can see that we group the technologies, the generation technologies, into base, mid, and then peak, which have different technical characteristics. And you can see here the marginal cost, the ramp rate of the different technologies, as well as the investment cost. And then wind power is the 4th technology that is considered. So here are some of the results for the illustrative example. Here we have on the x-axis the price cap, the level of the price cap in the system, and then on the y-axis we see the investment level for the different technologies. And as we can see, the investment level drops when the price cap is lowered in the system, and this really affects the investment level, especially of the peak technology. And this is obviously suboptimal investment in the market. And looking at the social welfare, we can see that is highly affected by the price cap. On the x-axis, again, we see the price cap, and on the y-axis, we see the decrease in social welfare. And then we can see, especially when the price cap is lowered to this level around 1,200 to 1,000 euros per megawatt hour for this specific case, we see that the decrease in social welfare really explodes. But when we introduce the incentive mechanism, the effects of the price cap are negligible, indicated by all the zero values here shown in blue. So on to the second part of the paper, the solution approach. These kind of large-scale MCPs are rather difficult to solve, and even dedicated state-of-the-art solvers such as Path struggle with the larger simulations. So we propose to use a decomposition approach, which is really fitting to this problem since it is area-based. It's a multi-area electricity market, and we intend to utilize the multi-area structure since the areas are only linked together by transmission lines, and they are more or less independent when you disregard the transmission lines. So by duplicating the flow variables in the problem structure, you can separate them, and then that only leaves one complicating constraint in your problem. And if you relax this complicating constraint, you allow an area-based decomposition of the problem. So we utilize this and apply the ADMM algorithm, or the alternating direction method of multipliers, which takes advantage of the multi-area structure of the problem. And looking at the flow diagram here, you see that the algorithm is initialized, and then you decompose the problem into several sub-problems for each of the areas. And they can then be solved in parallel. And after all of them have been solved, even by different processors or threads, then you update the dual variables associated with the complicating constraint, and then you reiterate until a tolerance requirement is satisfied, indicating that you are at an optimal solution. So here's an example of the solution approach using the ADMM algorithm. This shows on the x-axis the number of iterations required, or the number of iterations, and then on the y-axis the investment level in each of the technologies in each iteration. So we see how the investment level changes when the iteration count grows. And then after about 80 iteration, we settle on an investment level in all of the areas. This shows the primal and dual residuals that indicate how optimal, or indicate the sub-optimality of the solution. And as the iteration count grows, we see that the residuals decrease, indicating that we are getting closer to an optimal solution.
Egill, 2 minutes.
Yes. So here we can see the convergence of the prices in each of the areas for the peak hour, and we see that they converge quite smoothly as well, just as the capacities do. Here's a computational comparison between the two approaches. On the one hand, we have the benchmark algorithm, which solves a large MCP, a single one, using the path solver, and then the proposed decomposition approach based on the ADMM algorithm. And looking at the table here, we can see that the computational complexity grows quite rapidly as the area count increases. And this is not the case for the proposed approach, which has much more manageable computational complexity. And even for the 9-area system, the benchmark approach is unable to find a solution within reasonable time, while the proposed approach does find a solution. So to sum up, we introduced a generation incentive mechanism for a price cap electricity market, and it resulted in the optimal level of investment, no matter the price cap in the system. Then we introduced an efficient solution approach based on area-based decomposition and the ADMM algorithm, taking advantage of the special structure of the problem. And this enables the efficient modeling of large-scale electricity markets, which is becoming more and more important as areas in different markets become more interconnected. And the computational complexity grows more manageable than solving a single large problem. So thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to answer questions that you might have.
Great, thank you, Egill. We already have one question in from Zhao Yuan. The question is whether you use the path solver to solve the problem. Do you need any special formulation of the codes in YAMLs? Is the path solver reliable for large-scale problems?
So how I use the path solver, just use it as it is. I don't have any GAMS routines or any external routines that have to be written. Is it reliable for large-scale problems? As we saw in the results, it runs into problems with larger test cases, and this has also been indicated by several other researchers. So for more complex problems, it runs into some problems. And if you read the paper, I point towards other papers that have had similar issues. So you might want to take a look at that.
Thank you. Another question from Alexander Street. So as far as I could understand, the proposed correction pays generators the precise loss of opportunity costs, but not for the lines, correct? And is that a correct statement?
Yes, we were mainly looking at it for the generation side, since we are looking at the investment level for the generation. We are not looking at the different investment or different capacity for the transmission lines. So it was mainly focused on the incentives for the generation, since we allow the model to settle on the investment level for the generation. But you're correct, the price could be also corrected for the transmission lines.
And then there's a follow-up question to that, which is, don't you think that proposing to pay this is too close to proposing to pay the full original price? I think the concern of Alex here is you're getting close to the, or even above the price cap, if I'm interpreting this question.
Yes,
correctly.
but the point is that, of course, it would be best to have a completely free market, and that would solve all of the problems, I guess. But that's not the reality in many places where price caps are really a reality, and it's not a perfect solution, but it's still worth exploring, I guess.
I have a question of my own, since we have 2 minutes and no additional questions are showing up in the Q&A. If I understand correctly, are you proposing this as a add-on to, for example, the day-ahead market clearing price, or a separate mechanism that's run like annually, or something that's appended to the balancing price?
Well, I think it's
add or apply.
I think this would not have to be utilized on a daily basis, since this only has to be utilized when the price cap is active. So that's probably does not occur really frequently. But it's also debatable how this should be financed, but it should probably be financed by the demand side, since the demand side is getting increased surplus because of the price cap. And so it's a matter of socializing the cost of keeping the investment level in the system, instead of only those who are unfortunate enough to be consuming at exactly the moment when the price reaches this or is required to reach this level. So it's a matter of sharing the responsibility of keeping the investment level in the system.
Thank you, Egill. One very last quick question, because we're out of time, from Arthur Goncalves Giviciez. What is the size, for example, the number of buses of the solved system?
So since we are simulating a multi-area system, so it's just the areas are the buses, but of course there is within the areas there are more buses, but they are the nodal structure of the system is disregarded, and we only look at the areas.
All right, thank you, Egill. It's time to move to the third